Trump's ability to make a bad situation even worse has to be studied in the history books. We all know that everything he touches dies, and now he's got his tiny little hands all over FEMA. Trump spent the first few months of his presidency letting his rich friends take a literal chainsaw to the federal government. And one of the many important agencies that Elon Musk put his stink all over was FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And some GOP Republicans who haven't fully lost their ability to grasp reality are sounding the alarm. Before we dive into it, if you enjoy this kind of coverage here that MAGA hates to see, then you can join our little resistance here by subscribing to Really American. It's free, it's easy, and it helps us tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's some reporting from the National Resource Defense Council. FEMA and the nation's disaster safety net gets cut adrift. The Trump administration has made major cuts to FEMA. The president and Kristi Noem repeatedly talk about getting rid of FEMA entirely, and the acting administrator, Cameron Hamilton, this guy was just replaced with the new administrator, who's even worse, has taken an axe to FEMA's staff, programs, and basic functions, before getting fired after saying, "I do not believe it is in the best interests of the American people to eliminate the Federal Emergency Management Agency." It turns out the new guy, who again is even worse, is sort of kind of going on the same journey, and we'll get to that in a second. It's super interesting. The new head of FEMA is this guy, who has a look on his face like his daughter just brought home a guy who looks like me. And despite being a MAGA cult member, he's admitting that FEMA is not ready come hurricane season, which begins in just a couple of weeks. FEMA is already months behind schedule in its preparations for the hurricane season. Likely making Richardson's task more difficult is that 20% of FEMA's staff opted to take a voluntary buyout as part of the staff reduction push by Elon Musk and his Doge. It's likely to be a significant brain drain, which impedes our ability to respond, an anonymous FEMA official told the network. That source is likely staying anonymous because Richardson said this the first day he got to FEMA. In his first FEMA meeting, he warned staff, "Don't get in my way, I will run right over you." But then, just like his predecessor, once he got to FEMA, he realized how important it is. Richardson expressed surprise at the vast range of FEMA's responsibilities in his latest staff meeting. "I feel a little bit like Bubba from Forrest Gump," Richardson said, according to a video obtained by the Journal. "We've got hurricanes, we've got fires, we've got mudslides, we've got flash floods, we've got tornadoes, we've got droughts, we've got heat waves, and now we've got volcanoes to worry about." He sounds like a fourth grader who just realized what natural disasters are. And now that FEMA is acting like a pseudo-education daycare for MAGA idiots to learn about the natural world, the Trump administration is weighing completely eliminating FEMA. And some, I would say most GOP senators, like Florida's own Voldemort, Rick Scott, is saying stuff like this. "There's unbelievable waste, just billions of waste in disaster relief," Scott said. His state, Florida, is no stranger to storms and relies heavily on disaster relief. But Senator Scott argues the response should be more locally led. "A disaster is first your responsibility, local government, then state government, and then the federal government can be a financial partner," Scott said. "Like it's Shark Tank and we're pitching disaster relief." Now, although Rick Scott wouldn't mind seeing his own state snap off and sink into the Atlantic, some other folks actually don't want to die in a natural disaster and are concerned. The cuts that we've seen already have sent a massive wave of anxiety across the nation. For example, NOAA, one of the most important weather-related agencies that we have, is in all-out panic mode in order to fill forecasting jobs that were lost due to Doge. Critics of the cuts say the push to reassign meteorologists and other staffers show that the service has been cut too deep and that key public safety services are being harmed. This has never happened before. We've always been an agency that has provided 24/7 service to the American public, Fahey says. The risk is extremely high. If cuts like this continue to the National Weather Service, people will die. And that's why I'm so upset. You might have picked up on that through this video, that I'm getting kind of heated. And that's because this is already starting to happen. Over the weekend, there were massive tornadoes that struck Kansas, Missouri, and Kentucky. And in Kentucky, 20 people lost their lives. So folks are rightly asking the question, did staffing cuts at the Weather Service affect Kentucky's tornado response? Now, while the office in Jackson, Kentucky, for example, was fully staffed where this tornado hit, that full staff was 7 people shorter than it was before Trump took office. You can say you're fully staffed, but if you cut your staff in half, fully staffed is half the staff you're supposed to have. There is no meteorologist in charge at any of the 3 offices. Acting meteorologists in charge, who often have other job duties, are now running these offices. However, the National Weather Service and state officials said that the Jackson office was staffed overnight on Friday. So don't worry, guys, there was somebody there, even though that person was doing the job of multiple people, and there was no official meteorologist in charge. And these tornadoes have just absolutely been devastating. Like in Kentucky, where at least 19 people lost their lives. And in Plevna, Kansas, where people's homes are being completely leveled. In St. Louis, Missouri, this video of an apartment complex went viral because it gets completely scalped by a massive tornado. So you can imagine our commander-in-chief must have had some kind words or encouragement for the victims of this disaster, right? No, he spent all weekend complaining about celebrities not being nice enough to him and threatening to come after Walmart and Beyonce. We don't have a commander-in-chief as much as we have a commenter-in-chief. He spends most of his time responding to crap on Twitter. And many of the GOP senators are now voicing their concerns over his plan to gut FEMA even further. Top Republicans are pushing back at Trump's slash and burn, saying he's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. FEMA needs to be reformed, but it's an important instrument in recovery in every disaster I've ever seen, Representative Tom Cole, a chairman of the House Committee of Appropriations, said. We need to be careful about not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Senator Lisa Murkowski said potentially life-saving efforts in Alaska have been frozen due to the elimination of BRIC grants. The community worked hard and was successful with their BRIC grant, and now they are frozen or paused or eliminated, Murkowski said. Not sure which, but the threat is still sitting up there, and the cruise ships are starting to come. Representative Chuck Edwards, who Trump appointed to a North Carolina-focused task group on reforming FEMA following Hurricane Helene, recommended that the White House reform the BRIC program to be fair to all states, but not actually end it. On Tuesday, a bipartisan group including 16 Republicans sent Kristi Noem a letter calling on DHS to reinstate BRIC. Well, that's the problem. Kristi Noem doesn't know how to read. BRIC funds are spurring communities across the country to strengthen their resilience to extreme weather, and foregoing these critical investments will only make it harder and more expensive for communities to recover from the next storm. But that's the problem with MAGA and the far right. They don't believe in climate change. They can't be seen giving money to climate disasters because they don't think that climate disasters are any different than they've ever been. FEMA needs reform, I understand that, but I don't know what form that takes in the president's mind, so I'm concerned, Senator Shelley Moore Capito said. Senator Tom Tillis said, people lose me the minute they start talking about how we don't need FEMA. Storms have this weird way of not honoring state boundaries, so they tend to go all over the place. Every one requires a regional response. Are we seriously talking about eliminating a convening authority for a regional response and then mobilizing national resources that we're going to need to anyway? Oversight of the agency now appears to be headed down a much stricter and Trump-loyal path. FEMA's new head, David Richardson, reportedly told staff that he'd run right over them. Now, Richardson, that ghoul that we saw earlier, who's now the head of FEMA, seems to kind of realize how important FEMA is, but that doesn't seem like it's going to stop him from completely gutting the whole thing. He says that I and I alone in FEMA speak for FEMA, Richardson said. I'm here to carry out the president's intent for FEMA. Now, the only kind of intent I want from Trump is him in a fumigation tent. You guys stay safe out there. I'm Tony Hinderman with Really American, and I'll catch you next time.